IVM.
This IPL season, you stand a chance to win some epic prizes during the Cred Mega Jackpot Week from 27th April to 3rd May. You could win prizes like 3 whole years of free flights or a Tata Safari car and lots more. Just pay your credit card bills on the Cred app. Crazy jackpot prizes unveiled every day and crazy offers by partner brands on specific days. So don't miss out. Just download Cred. Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today we're going to have another round with Sonia Jhas. The last podcast was about fitness and health and how we can start making small tweaks to our day, not waiting for the whole world to open up. And that's when we start making the big change. But instead, what are the small steps that we can make? And a large part of this whole fitness and wellness is our mindset towards it, right? Mindset towards fitness, mindset towards ourselves, and the general way that we compose our thoughts, the emotions that we have through the day. So today we're going to be focusing on that aspect of our life, the mindset. So Sonia, welcome back to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. So much fun.
Yay. All right. So Sonia, mindset. What does mindset mean to you?
I think mindset really, as you sort of said so concisely, is just how you are choosing to show up in your life, no matter what it is that you are doing, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's career, relationships, how you are showing up in your life based on your thoughts and how they're organized. And I think mindset is so underrated and so critical because, at least for me, and frankly, all my clients, what I have really learned is that you cannot crack the code on your health and wellness or happiness or joy or authenticity or any of the fundamental components of living like a fulfilled life. You can't crack the code on any of those until you do the unlayering and the digging and the reorganizing and the reformatting from a mindset perspective to bring yourself to a new place where you can create, as we talked about last time, that new foundation that's no longer a house of cards. Right? And I think that's the biggest thing for me that I found sort of growing up was that it wasn't about how are you feeling and what are you thinking and what are you afraid of and who do you want to be when you grow up and what happens in the quiet whispers of your soul. It was, what is the output? Where is the extra 3%? Are you doing enough extracurricular activities? Will you get into the top university? And output mode, right? Output, 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 not inner work at all. And I think what happens along the ways is that you accumulate so much noise, so much clutter, so much baggage, so many values that are not your own, so many limiting beliefs that are preventing you and holding you back from who your potential really is meant to be, from the perfectionist tendencies that so many of us struggle with, which is the all or nothing approach, on again, off again approach that we talk about, and that we mentioned in the last time that we were talking. It's that stuff that makes this journey as an adult then feel so soul-sucking and so disconnected and like this really tough uphill climb, instead of it being a process where you are flowing and doing and supporting yourself and doing the hard work, but also feeling good along the way. And I think mindset is the piece that people don't look at when it comes to health and wellness, because they're like, it's the quick fix. I'm going to lose the weight. I will feel good about myself. Happiness is only 10 pounds away. And then 10 pounds happens. They're happy for 5 seconds. That ends. Happiness disappears. And they're back in the same rut. So it's like, how do we break that cycle?
Correct. And the thing is that you can measure those 10 pounds, right? So you have a tangible output. You can't measure what's happening in your brain or your mind or your mindset.
So true.
Right? So how do we work on that? Where is the starting point for people to say that, all right, fair enough, I want to start with my mindset, but what should I be doing first? Like, how should I get around to doing that?
That's a great question. For me, one of the most important pieces of the equation has been journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And I say journaling because I have a hard time connecting to my feelings. I'm a people pleaser. I like harmony. I like things to look a certain way. I was a perfectionist for a very long time. I'm frankly still a recovering perfectionist. So actually connecting with like, what's happening in here that I'm not trying to rationalize away is very challenging for me. And so when I started doing morning pages, which is essentially this idea where you sort of wake up in the morning and before you do anything else, you grab a journal and a pen and you free flow write for like 10 to 20 minutes. And it doesn't matter what you write about. You can be writing, I hate this so much the entire time for 20 minutes. But the idea is for 10 to 20 minutes, your pen does not leave the paper and you just vomit it out. Anything that comes to mind. And in the beginning, it'll be like, oh, it looks like it's sunny outside. Turns out it was, I don't feel like I slept that well. My neck is kind of hurting. I'm so super stressed about my to-do list. Let me write out my to-do list. Let me get organized around that. But because, 10 to 20 minutes is actually quite a long time, what ends up happening is slowly, the stream of consciousness comes out and you will be amazed at what comes up, whether it's creativity, whether it's sorrow, whether it's angst, whether it's anger. For me, a lot of times, a lot of anger has come up that I didn't know I was holding on to because anger is not an emotion I was ever taught to acknowledge. It was very swept under the rug in our household.
Correct.
And so, that process, once you sort of like get over the judgment of it, like, what am I even doing? And I'm even writing in this, and this is a strange practice to have on a daily basis. And what kind of habit is this? Once you get over that sort of weird judgment and you lean into the process, you'll see even 1 week into doing it, it becomes a really liberating process where you uncover so much of that clutter, so much of that fear, so much of those hidden desires and wants. And it becomes a really beautiful opening up process is what I will say. It's not therapy. You don't come out of it with magical solutions and new tools in your toolkit where you're like, I know how to solve my problem. But you do come out with insights around like, what's really going on? What is your inner self saying? And then once you can see that and you can connect with it, then you can decide what to do, right? Then we can decide how to deal with it. What kind of help do we need? What kind of changes do we need to make? But without that tuning in, which frankly, nobody really knows how to do, particularly, and I don't mean to point the finger here, but like men are particularly bad at this because at least girls usually tend to be like, I have a problem. I'm going to call a girlfriend. But, men tend to be quite bottled up, and this can be one of those really safe ways to start acknowledging that we have feelings and thoughts that are the underpinning for why we are doing what we're doing.
Correct.
And where those feelings of lack of happiness, lack of consistency, the on again, off again, all those sorts of things that we struggle with in our life, it starts to be clearer and clearer. Like, what are the common themes that keep showing up?
Correct.
And I think with that insight, then we can do something about it, right? Then we can create new habits.
I love it because this is the very, very important starting point. And you touched on 2-3 important things that I want to just highlight. One is that this is not a girl-oriented thing. Very often we think it is, female-oriented, girl-oriented, because they're so used to the Dear Diary concept.
Totally. Oh
right?
my God, exactly.
So Dear Diary is not journaling. And it's definitely not free-flow journaling, which is completely different. Even as a man, doing it is a liberating feeling. Very often you can't get down to maybe finishing a paragraph. That's why I tell people, at least get down to writing stupid Ashdin is making me do this. Right?
Totally.
I just keep writing stupid Ashdin, make me do this, stupid Ashdin, make me do this. And then suddenly you'll come up with, where did this thought come from? Yeah, where did that thought come from?
That's exactly it. And let go of your own judgment. Don't tell anybody you're doing this. You don't have to be like, and then like, you should know I woke up this morning and journaled. Like, you don't have to champion this to all of your colleagues. Like, just stay quiet about it and give it a chance. And I think particularly for men, this is the type of thing that they feel like really silly doing.
Yeah.
But I think they are the ones that actually need this the most because, as I said, they're like lacking that female infrastructure of like, oh my God, he said, and then she said, and what happened, and how's it going? And I think it can be really shifting for
Correct.
both genders, but less common for men.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a fantastic way of understanding what the mental blocks are and what the mindset blocks are. That when you do, or whatever you do later on, you know which aspects of your life you need to focus on or at least start getting those on. Lovely.
So true.
So we start with journaling. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Then how do we progress from there to understanding a mindset towards taking it to another level altogether?
It's a great question. And I feel like for me on my own personal journey, what has come next started with meditation and moved into breath work and now is sort of moving its way back to meditation and a hybrid approach. So started with meditation because obviously all the new age self-help stuff is all meditation and all of the ancient India stuff is meditation. And you're like, you put the two together, the answer is meditation. So, I think we all know that quieting the mind, acknowledging the thoughts, letting them go and working on that silence is an important tool. But for somebody like me, who, again, recovering perfectionist, likes to do things perfectly, likes to have a lot of critique around how things could be better and why that wasn't a good meditation session or it was, which is totally counterintuitive and exactly contra to what you're trying to accomplish with meditation, I found that it was too big of a leap for me. I was just not able to go from chaos and clutter to let me meditate and find my peace. But I did discover breath work. And for me, breath work ended up being a tremendous tool to help me move through the spectrum. So I tried lots of different versions of breath work, and there's so many different protocols you can adopt out there, whether it's Art of Living, whether it's pranayama, whether it's David White. There's so many people out there who are coaches in this space. And some are a little bit more robust. Some are a little bit more slow and controlled and rhythmic. Some are diaphragm breathing. Some are throat breathing. Some are nose breathing. You can play around with this. And the beauty of the internet is it's all at your fingertips. But for me, the best piece about breath work has been that it is an active process for me to focus on deliberately while reoxygenating and re-energizing and sort of moving all that energy through the body. But it's also because it's so focused, allowing me that anchor so that I'm not like, and then my schedule, and then my children, and then this, and then I thought about this. I'm less fleeting. I am more focused. And there's very little judgment throughout the process, as opposed to when I meditate or have meditated, it's been like, you're not doing this right. And then I'm like, stop thinking about that. And I waste so much time talking to myself about the not doing that with breath work, I find that a lot of that evaporates. It again becomes a beautiful nugget in the morning after journaling to reinforce, you sort of offload. It all sort of comes out on paper. You don't even know what to do with that information. And then you go into a little process of breath work. This can be 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. You can make this morning routine as elaborate as you want or not. But for me, even 5 minutes is enough to just sort of like bring me back to the present moment, reconnect with my body, reconnect with myself, re-energize a little bit, and just focus again, right? Because it's like you opened up Pandora's box with the journaling. And now you were like, let's come back to body. Let's come back to breath. Let's come back to simple. Let's come back to focus. For me, it has been tremendously shifting. And now that I've become quite proficient at breath work, I'm now sort of starting to pivot back to static meditation again to see if it's something that is feeling good or something that I want to explore a little bit more. And I sort of like am doing well-ish, whatever that means with it, because again, no judgment, but it's happening anyway. So, I think it's about figuring out for you what version of it can accomplish for you at the time what you feel like you need, right? Yeah. And so neither one is better, neither one is the way to go. And I think, again, for a lot of us, it can be really easy to get stuck with which protocol should I do because then I'm a winner. And I have found that I thought it was going to be meditation. It ended up being breath work. I'm flowing back to meditation and allowing that fluidity. But as you said, sort of creating that habit where you are committing to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however elaborate you want your routine to be, because you showed up, And it was the consistency of the practice that made it something that was really beneficial for you.
Correct. Absolutely. And it is not the perfect meditation that you have to do or the perfect breath work that you have to do. It is just start. Just do the breath work. And that itself is going to be telling you something, because just like Sonia said, it's a journey. You're never going to have the right perfect answer. And there is no right perfect answer. Whoever tells you that's the right perfect answer is lying, because they are also evolving in this. And when we talk about mindset, when we talk about, the way that our mind is shifting or changing, it is a process, right? There is no perfect way of getting through it. Which was your favorite breathing modality? Which one do you think is a good place for people to start off? Not like the perfect one, but a good place for people to start off with.
I feel like the sort of pranayama breathing that I learned through Art of Living, that is a little bit more throat constricted, felt to be really nicely controlled and focused, and really digestible in the beginning, as opposed to me feeling like I'm sort of like huffy and puffy and taking in air and chest is expanding and everything is happening and breath is going up and breath is going down. And I find that with some of the other forms of breathing, when you're first starting off, it can feel a bit overwhelming. It can feel a bit hyperventilating, and it can almost feel like there's just too much happening and it's hard.
Yeah.
Whereas when I first sort of did it's like exercise, exactly. But whereas when I found that I was doing the pranayama sort of breathing through Art of Living in the beginning, I was like, no, this feels like it is a gentle but focused starting point that is not giving me not enough structure, where I'm just like, breathing into a bag and I don't know what to do about it. But at the same time, still giving me enough of the flow that coming out of it, I am feeling like something has shifted. Now, what specifically, I don't know, but for me, it was like a really clean starting point. So that would be my recommendation.
Nice.
And if it doesn't feel good and you're like, I only like breathing through my nose, then find one where you only breathe through your nose. Like the point is to move with it. And I think we're all so unique and different in this way that, again, it's like not the perfect version, and don't be afraid to explore. And don't be afraid to follow someone and be like, they're the answer for me. And then you find somebody else, you're like, oh my God, no, they're the answer for me. You can have evolving answers, and there's no judgment around that either.
I love that, evolving answers. We must someday geek out on breathing for sure.
We must. We're going to have a whole podcast where it's just you and I inhaling and exhaling, and people are going to be like, I don't know why we're listening to this, but we'll do it.
That's going to be fun. Actually, not a bad plan. I'm going to tell IVM we're going to do this. Before going ahead, we'll take a quick break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, thewholetruthfoods.com, Seat, PayPal, and Cred. We thank you all for your support. Tune into The Note, where Maruk Inayat talks to Dr. Bipin Joshi about the second wave of COVID. He calls it no less than World War III. On The Habit Coach, Ashdin was joined by Yoshita Dave, who's a sex educator and intimacy coach. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam Gupta was joined by Amit Thakkar and Hiral Jain of Market Pulse Technologies, and they talked about trading in Indian markets. All Things Policy by the Takshashila Institute had on board Mihir Mahajan and Pranay Kotastane to talk about the recent changes in the Indian intellectual property front. You should definitely check out the Cyrus Says episode with Ace casting director Mukesh Chabra. They discussed some of his best work. We also had Ira Mukhoti, who has authored various books on history and mythology from a female gaze. The IPL season's in full swing, and we have Edges and Sledges in English and Khel Niti in Hindi if you want to check out cricket content. Really, really great conversations on both of those shows. Do check those out. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
And we are back. So now you got all your thoughts out on paper, right? You're suddenly evaluating and like, wow, I didn't know that was going on. Now you've sat down, you've meditated, you've allowed these thoughts to come, you've allowed these thoughts to pass. You focused on your breathing, you've given your mind something to do. So it's starting to calm down in that process.
So true.
Right? What happens next? How else do we start developing this beautiful, I wouldn't say organ, but this beautiful aspect of our life?
I think what can come next sort of really depends on time, space, the energy, focus. For some people, what can be really beautiful at a time like this is affirmations. These statements that are conditioning your mind to think differently about who you are and what you want. And again, some of these things can feel super hokey because you're like, I'm just like looking in the mirror and saying things about myself. And like, what is this even doing? And I just feel silly and stupid. But affirmations have been scientifically proven to really help reroute your brain away from limiting beliefs and all those sorts of things and just sort of set the tone for this new way of thinking that you'd like to have. And over time, it becomes habit, which is, what we're working on through your podcast and through everything that we do in life is how do we make everything feel less difficult through automation somehow. Correct. And so I think affirmations can be a really positive tool that can really transform your life when you do them long enough. However, I get that for a lot of people, first of all, they don't have enough time in the morning to be able to belabor this for so long. Affirmations feel like they're a bit too far off. They feel a bit hokey. They're like, I think good enough about myself right now. I'm fine. In which case, I would say the other less sort of targeted approach could be as simple as listening to audiobooks. Taking 15 minutes in the morning while you're getting ready, you're brushing your teeth, you're doing your thing, you're taking a shower, makeup, whatever, to listen to an audiobook. I find, it's a beautiful way to keep chipping away at knowledge, at information, at expansion, at just sort of like bringing in goodness into my mind. And it's also a really great way to override the thoughts and the feelings that have come up that you're sort of still dealing with from the journaling, that you've now sort of switched gears. You're feeling good from the breath work, but you're like, oh God, my mind is now switching into my to-do list for the day. Everything feels too stressful. Turns out I hate my boss. You start to then switch gears at some point in time. And when that happens, I find sometimes it's really helpful to be like, this isn't even about that. I've got somebody else talking in my ear, giving me, whether it's self-help related books, whether it is just like, the history of monkeys, whatever, whatever you're interested in at that point in time that can sort of keep you out of your head and out of that sort of frenzied mode of, okay, that's done. What's next? How do I just sort of like go into problem solving mode?
Correct.
I think that can be really therapeutic to just extend this state of mind for a little while longer where it is self-care, it is focused on you, it is focused on learning and growing and expansion. And even something as simple as listening to an audiobook can feel like, you know what, good for you. You listened to something today. That's like nice. And when we talk about these like easy gold stars and these easy ways to feel like positive momentum, unlike affirmations, which can feel a bit more like involved and onerous and targeted, I think something as simple as like audiobooks or, podcasts,
correct,
yours
absolutely,
being a primary example, can be a lovely way to just stay in that self-focused space of betterment. And I think that's really all you're looking for.
Yeah. They prime the mind for thinking about new ideas. They prime the mind for whatever aspect of growth that you're looking at in your life. And I think choosing your podcast for that makes a difference.
Absolutely. And I find them to be inspiring, right? It's inspiring. There's somebody out there like you who is sharing information, putting in the effort, building his stuff. Like, whether it's that you're an entrepreneur and you can look at that and be like, oh my God, one day me too. Or it's just that like, there are people out there that are doing things, sharing information. I feel like some component of that gets to you and it allows you to think bigger, whether you realize that you are or not. And I think that that's so valuable at the start of your day.
Correct. Absolutely. And, you mentioned limiting beliefs in passing. Can you tell us a little bit about what limiting beliefs are? How have you helped maybe clients get over that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So limiting beliefs are, beliefs that we have that don't serve us. And, it's very easy to sort of look at our beliefs and say like, oh, I believe in God and I believe in this, and these sort of big static statements about our beliefs. But really our beliefs are our interpretation of ourselves and the world around us. And when they don't serve us, they are limiting. And so we create these limiting beliefs based on our experiences from childhood all the way up to where we are now. And they can really impact sort of how we show up in the world for ourselves, for others, how we engage in relationships with others, what opportunities we put ourselves forth for, what we hold ourselves back from. it's as simple as, for example, a limiting belief, let's say, being like, I'm not good at group fitness.
Mm.
And that limiting belief has come from the fact that one time when you were 6 and you were on stage and you were doing a performance and everybody was watching you, it was like coordinated dance moves and you couldn't keep up and you're like, oh my God, I'm like so bad with choreography. And that, when you were 6 years old, stuck in your mind.
Correct.
And then again, you tried like Zumba later on when you were 23 and, everybody else in the class was doing it really well. And you're like, see, like I told you, like I can't even do this really well. You're not realizing that this legacy limiting belief is in fact pushing you into a predetermined future. So we have a limiting belief. It tells us what we think about ourselves deep in our core. Based on that limiting belief, we then move to our actual output in a similar sort of space, something that feels similar to that previous experience. Because in our mind, we're like, I'm not good at this. We sort of half-ass it. We don't give it all our attention and energy. We are not trying to bring our best to it because we're like, oh my God, what's the point? I'm not even good at this. I'm not as strong as so-and-so. I'm not as coordinated as so-and-so. And so we sort of don't show up in our full capacity. We then reinforce the limiting belief, which is, see, I told you I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this. And then the next time somebody is like, hey, do you want to do this? We're like, nope, I don't want to do it because I'm not good at it. And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And so I know that I'm using sort of like a corny example about like group fitness or like doing Zumba, but this exists when it comes to health and wellness to a T. I can never stick to my diet. It's the food stuff that really messes me up. I'm always good for 2 weeks, but then by the third week, like all of these dialogues and narratives that people say as sort of jokes, or they think to themselves like, yeah, this is sort of what happens. But like, I can't have cookies in the house because if I have cookies in the house, I'm going to eat all the cookies.
Correct.
These statements that we like to make about ourselves feel like they're just like light sort of jokes and things like that. But really, they are loaded upon interpretations of who we are that don't set us up for success every time we try to climb the same mountain. And so when it comes to fitness and it comes to nutrition, so much of the work that I do with my clients is literally, like we talked about morning pages, like vomiting out all the limiting beliefs that we can over the course of a week, over the course of a month, just tracking and acknowledging and tracking and acknowledging and not trying to change anything, but just becoming aware of the mean stuff we are constantly saying to ourselves all the time. Because once we can see it, then we can reorganize, reformat, use affirmations, use different tools to combat these beliefs that we have about themselves. But again, so few of us even realize how unsupportive we are being to ourselves at all times. Like we would never talk to a friend that way, but we're constantly berating ourselves with these ideas about why we're not good enough. And then somehow we expect to be so committed that then we show up in a different headspace. And then we wonder, well, why do we keep slipping? It's because deep down inside, you think that by week 3, you will fall off the wagon because it's happened 6 times before. And you just believe it's a predetermined future. And so when it comes to limiting beliefs, I certainly don't believe that it's like a quick solve and, years of therapy. And we're all still unpacking limiting beliefs that continue to show up in our lives. But I think the biggest piece of it is, are you willing to tune into them? Are you willing to acknowledge them? Are you willing to write them down so that you can actually take a hard look at who's talking to you and where did that come from?
Absolutely.
That's sort of, it's a big bucket, but that's the crux of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Forget being supportive to ourselves. We're bullies, right? We bully ourselves all the time. And
we really do.
And the beauty of this whole system that you just outlined, where we're talking about understanding our limiting beliefs, and then the journaling helps us catch that, right? Oh, it's the 3-week mark now. I'm going to follow my diet. Perfect. Now I wrote it down. I know what's going to happen. Then ask yourself, is there any truth to this statement? Right? And your mind's going to go and say, yes, this happened the last time we did this, happened the last time. What can I do about it now? Right?
Totally.
You don't have to live with that just because it happened in the past. What can I do about it now?
No, absolutely. As you said, you cast the doubt on these statements or facts that your mind has made up about itself. And from there, rationally, you can then be like, no, this is not this is in fact not a fact. This is in fact just a statement I have made up about myself. And here are all the reasons why it's flawed, why it doesn't apply anymore. And you keep catching and releasing and catching and releasing. And that becomes the game that you play, right? You notice it, you catch it, you release it, you override with something else and you move on. And that process becomes faster and faster and more of a habit. And that's what we're looking for so that it becomes more organic.
Correct. And don't go searching for an end. There is no end to this. You'll keep unearthing things. Oh my
God.
And that's the beauty of it.
The journey is a lifetime journey.
And it's like, I keep giving the example that you don't go to a concert to see it finish, right? You go to a concert to try and enjoy each of those, the minutes that you're there for. So enjoy the minutes. Don't go and say, when is it going to end? When is it going to end? When will my mind be clean? Forget about that.
It'll never be clean because there will always be another layer. And that I think is the last piece of sort of the advice that I have, which is talk, get help, communicate, this idea of having a therapist or having a coach or having a mentor or having somebody in the mix with you that you can go to be able to unpack these discoveries and learnings and thoughts and processes that you are now taking on. I think it can be really important to get that guidance and that help, however it looks for you. Yeah. And I know, therapy has always been considered very taboo, and it's only now starting to become mildly more mainstream in the North American culture, but obviously not in the Indian culture yet. I think starting to lean into your own versions of what that could look like, whether it's therapy or not, is critical because these are not the conversations we were ever taught to have.
Correct.
So expecting us to have a robust toolkit now suddenly at the age of 20, 30, 40, 50 is unreasonable. Yeah. But we can get guidance around how to build ourselves up with a better foundation even now, wherever we're at. And being willing to do that and recognizing the importance of doing it, I think is just instrumental, because otherwise you're signing yourself up for a very specific version of life that is going to keep you feeling quite detached, quite disconnected, quite unfulfilled. It's going to lack joy. It's going to lack pleasure. It's going to lack fulfillment. And ultimately that eats at you, right? Like that stuff becomes undeniable. Then we get into the cycle of numbing ourselves with food, with alcohol, with drugs, with all the other things, and with Netflix. And it becomes that vicious cycle, right? So you gotta be willing to do the work to break free. But
absolutely,
it happens, which is really nice.
Mindset is so critical in all of this. Sonia, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us.
Oh, thank you.
Where can people reach out to you to have a conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's so much available on my Instagram handle at SoniaJhas, SoniaJhas, where, yes, I focus on the fitness and nutrition aspects of my own life and helping others. But more than that, I really strive to have these conversations around mindset and mental health, because as an Indian girl, these are conversations that we need to have more and more of to break down the barriers and the bottlenecks and to break down the stigma. And so that's definitely a place that people can go to join in on the conversation and just to feel less alone, because we're all going through the struggle. Correct. Right? We're all dealing with versions of the same challenges. And I think the more that we can normalize that, the more that we can feel safe to be able to talk. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
So start these habits and share with us your progress using the hashtag #TheHabitCoach. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME 180. That's Awesome 180.
Namaskar, dear friends. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. Life, as you know, is a journey. And you and I, travelers, how can we celebrate this travel? I have a podcast for you, Begin the Journey. I share stories and moments from my life. Do tune in every Monday and Thursday to listen to my podcast on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from. Cheers.
Working Monday to Friday glued to your chair making you feel dull? Worry not. Get your 5-minute weekly dose of travel around the world with postcards from nowhere. Join me every Thursday as I explore the strange, obscure, and fascinating parts of the world and bring out facets of travel you may not have thought of before. You can find us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.